Several several physicians. So Dr. Ramsey asked for is our infectious disease medical director. He's been with us for several years. He literally has probably treated almost every patient with an infectious disease diagnosis here at Sutter Lakeside Hospital for the past 5 years, I think, Ramsey,
Just about.
and is often gives presentations at our medical staff and is a trusted source of wisdom for not just infectious disease, but for general medicine principles. And we're really happy to have him. He's moderating our session today to talk, to give information about the COVID vaccines. I often have Dr. Michelle Curry. She's an anesthesiologist as well as an intensivist here at Lakeside. And then Dr. Flum, Jeannie Flum, was going to join us. And I don't, Jeannie, are you on the line? I don't.
I think Diane, I think she's currently trying to get onto the computer. So.
Computer. Okay. So she she's here specifically because we know as a GYN, she wanted to be able to provide answers to questions that had anything to do with pregnancy, fertility issues like that. And so, and Carrie, thank you for being here as well. Dr. Hollenbeck's our medical director of anesthesia, as well as our vice chief of staff. And with that, Ramsey, I'll let you take the stage, and we can start.
Sounds great. Well.
One thing, I'll be monitoring if you have questions. If you can put them in the chat box, I'll monitor them and help direct them to the physicians that are on the panel right now.
Got it. Well, thanks everybody, and great. Thanks for the introduction, Dr. Page. I appreciate that. And this is meant to be an interactive session. I have a lot of content prepared, but you can stop me. I want to address your concerns. We want to address your concerns about the vaccine and vaccination rates, et cetera. And that's why, that's the nature of why why I'm giving this talk. We're also recording this, so please keep your microphones on mute unless you're speaking. You're welcome to answer questions. We'll post it on a private YouTube link. They won't be shared publicly, but people could perhaps stumble upon it. So just so you know that just by your picture here will be there. So if you want to share private messages, do that through the chat if you don't want your voice to appear up there. So just a broad background on where we are with the pandemic. More than 5 billion vaccine doses now. These are proven cases, to a 250 million proven cases almost. So it just keeps going up. I'm going to be sharing websites that I refer to and then show you studies. Things are changing so quickly. By the time I make a PowerPoint slide, it's obsolete. So I no longer have been doing that. To give you a brief update, the pandemic, that are 1 minute, that is worth watching.
Hello. Hi. Anyone know where Dr. Flum is? Yeah. Sorry.
Not presenting. Can you please mute?
Hi.
All right, so that's just a brief background, it's very informative. They update it every day. That was yesterday's update. Just to show you, we can look, oops, this changed, but Lake County, what's happening on the local level, 5,163 cases, 74 deaths, certainly some of those at Lakeside. And we are in a spike, as we know. And if you look at it as a county overall, we're almost equal to our wintertime spike, which is what's happening in Florida and other parts of the country that haven't had high vaccination rates. This is from Worldometer. Daily new cases in the US overall increasing, and daily deaths are starting to go up. And you can always, this is a very interesting website. That was in the world, sorry. So we can go to US data and you can see similar trends. So down here, total cases starting to increase, daily new cases, again, spiking. This is driven mainly by certain other parts of the country. If you look at, for example, Florida, ICUs are full, hospitals are full, doctors are protesting. It's a bad situation. You can see there's an uptick in total number of cases, and they are way over now where they were at the worst of the pandemic. So it's an unfortunate, active cases. Look at that sharp spike straight up. So that's even a steeper curve than was seen back in the early winter months. This is from our World in Data, just showing share of people fully vaccinated against COVID by country. And you can see the United States is well below quite a few other countries, which is unfortunate. So this is interesting to see is some countries, I'll clear out some of the chatter for a second, but some countries that Israel had, is one of the most vaccinated countries, and they're seeing a big spike in infections, not in hospitalizations. And we'll get into that in a second. If you look at the data for Iceland, this is from Dr. Topol's Twitter feed. Eric Topol at UCSF, he tweets, I don't know, maybe 20 times a day on COVID. They had very few cases, and they had a Delta spike, and they upped their vaccine coverage, and now they're headed down. So they have 78%, almost 80% fully vaccinated, more than most countries. So many older Americans still aren't vaccinated. Vaccination rates, higher is yellow, lower is red. No data for Georgia and the Virginias. But if you look at England, they're all yellow. Yellow. This sort of darker. Scotland is more highly vaccinated than England. But if you look at the U.S., there's a lot of red, and that's starting to change because people are getting scared, rightly so. But they got their Delta wave under control much more quickly than we did. We haven't yet, based on higher vaccination rates. And this is from New York Times, where the Delta variant has driven up vaccination rates. Look at Florida. You saw that in the Hopkins video I showed you, increasing, 12% increase in vaccination, recently. And Texas, California is also up. So Delta and Alabama, 12%, Louisiana. So a lot of the red states are increasing their vaccination rates now that Delta is really sickening quite a lot of people. In Florida, pandemic is worse now than ever before. As we said, one of the major concerns is for children who are ineligible to be vaccinated. That's been one of the biggest concerns We can talk more about schools and vaccines, but protecting our children by vaccinating ourselves, and not just our children, but children in the community and schools that we might we might come into contact with their parents, and we need to protect them as much as possible by getting vaccinated. One of the major issues around vaccinations has been poor messaging from public health authorities. We can go into a lot of details about that, but there's a lot of uncertainty in science. Science is basically trying to say what's more certain than not. With a drug, for example, does aspirin prevent heart disease more than it causes gastrointestinal bleeding? That's still a question that some people raise and ask, even though we have a lot of data. So there's a lot of scientific uncertainty here. I used to work at the World Health Organization. We've done vaccination campaigns for flu and other diseases, of course. Even there, I was surprised that a lot of people working at headquarters in Geneva would not be vaccinated. So I had lots of talks while I was there discussing the pros and cons. Now, this is, I think flu vaccine's been around for a long time. People aren't generally scared to get it. The mRNA vaccines are new, although this week on Monday, as we all probably know, the Pfizer vaccine is fully approved, which grants people more liberty in using it. So, and also gives people a lot more, another reason to get vaccinated. Hey, it's now approved. So now I'll go ahead and use it. But we can't, the CDC could have handled things better, and they could have also explained, I'm not criticizing them, and I'm not inside the CDC, but explaining uncertainty to the public is challenging. And especially in these politicized times, we don't really know what's going to happen. There's no way of knowing are we going to get another variant? Are we going to get a Theta variant or whatever it might be called that is going to be worse than Delta? And the probability is yes, until the rest of the world gets vaccinated and we get this pandemic under control, we will still have more variants, and we'll be talking about booster doses. We need to be open and honest that we don't know how best to protect everybody with a vaccine against all strains.
Dr. Asper, can you just briefly describe why variants pop up, why being vaccinated helps decrease variants pop up, not just.
Yes. So variants pop up. This virus doesn't mutate very quickly. Okay, not as quickly as say HIV, which mutates super quickly. So it doesn't mutate that quickly, but having said that, it does mutate. And if you take 1 billion people and infect them, or you take a country with 1.3 billion people like India, and you have lots of virus. So every time, I don't know how quickly it mutates off the top of my head, but let's just say every 2 million, carries millions of copies. So if it only mutates once in 1 million replications, that's still several mutations per person. Multiply that by hundreds of millions of people getting infected, then you have the opportunity for plenty of mutations. And so with a vaccine that slows down the spread, and we'll talk about that, but a vaccine that slows down the spread, you're giving less opportunity for new mutations to develop. It's not going to be zero, and it may never be zero. We'll probably end up living with COVID for the rest of our lives, unless we find a pan-coronavirus vaccine that works. But we're in the setting where we have so many people being infected that there's just that much opportunity for the virus to mutate and escape or have variations that allow it to be more infectious. And so some people have likened the Delta strain to chickenpox. It's not quite as infectious as chickenpox. And chickenpox, we know, doesn't usually kill people. At least people used to get it at young ages. And it's rare that people will die from chickenpox. But it's not rare that younger people now are dying from COVID, which is a major concern. Did I answer that question well?
Yes, I think that some people are confused about the connection between getting vaccinations and why many of the benefits of vaccination, but one of the benefits is to decrease the global viral load and the global viral replication rate. That'll decrease the chance of mutants that are more highly infectious or better at infecting us.
Exactly. And I'm not talking about treatments in this talk, but until we get the oral treatments like Tamiflu, the Tamiflu equivalent for coronaviruses, perhaps we won't get this under control. But if you eventually we will have hopefully a pill that we can swallow at the first sign of COVID infections, and that will be able to treat us at home and also help prevent you infecting other people. So that is not yet available. So right now, vaccines are the only things. A lot of the concerns around vaccines have been, well, these mRNA vaccines, they're new. They're injecting me with, I don't know, everything. I've heard everything from microchips from Bill Gates to 5G wireless transmitters. And, you see a lot on the internet. But in truth, these are very simple vaccines. They were hard to make because it's hard to stabilize the mRNA. So what they did is they took sequences from the spike proteins, okay? In the lab, they synthesized, so it's an artificial sequence. It's not coming from the virus. They don't take virus and then do something to it. At this point, they just synthesize in the lab, the sequence, and then they put that sequence into a fatty particle. And that fatty particle is what stabilizes the mRNA enough so that when you inject a solution containing mRNA, and the beauty about these mRNA vaccines is that there's no preservative. There's no mercury, there's none of the aluminum-based adjuvants that were reasons that people didn't want vaccines in the past. And then they just inject that into you, and it goes, it's taken up by some immune cells in the body, and without entering the nucleus, so that mRNA doesn't go into your nucleus, it doesn't have a long-lasting effect, and then it's transcribed, and your cells produce the spike protein, and then your body makes antibodies against the spike protein. So it's great, and if you think about it, this is not lasting forever in your cells. If it was, you would not need a booster. You would not need a second dose because the effect wears off. Then you need a second dose because the mRNA half-life is very short. It doesn't last very long, even inside a cell. So just keep that in mind. A lot of people are thinking, wow, this is going to stay in me forever. Well, the antibody or memory of antibodies will hopefully stay for a long time, but you're not producing these things forever. That's why you need a booster. People forget to think about it that way.
Dr. Asfer, I have a question. What is the importance of the mRNA not going into the nucleus of our cells? Can you speak to that and about DNA and how it differs?
Well, this is a confusing topic, but talking strictly about the Pfizer and Moderna mRNA vaccines, the significance is that they don't enter your nucleus at all. They cannot become part of your cell's DNA. The DNA is the material in your nucleus, that in your chromosomes. So these mRNA strands can never enter the nucleus. There's no mechanism for them to go into the nucleus. They can exit mRNA can exit the nucleus. In fact, that's what your body's machinery does. It decides it needs to make a protein, for example, a digestive enzyme, and it will the DNA will be read and mRNA will be produced, and that will exit the nucleus, and then be transcribed into a protein in the cytoplasm over here. That's what's happening here. But there's no mechanism the other way around. HIV is a different virus. Okay, HIV is an RNA virus that does carry an enzyme called reverse transcriptase, and that enzyme that HIV carries with it when it infects you helps the HIV. It makes a DNA copy of the HIV RNA, and it puts that into your nucleus. So it has another enzyme called integrase that puts it into your nucleus. Now, that's why you can't get rid of HIV. But think infections like influenza and coronaviruses, they don't do that. And this mRNA, there's no reverse transcriptase enzyme allowing that to happen. There's no mechanism for it to happen. So,
Dr. Aspor, I've heard some people say, this vaccine will increase my chances of getting cancer because it will get into my genetic code. Can you speak to that?
So as I've been trying to say that, yeah, that's a good question. It cannot get into your genetic code. It cannot get into your DNA. It doesn't get into the nucleus. It is very unlikely to cause cancer. There's no mechanism that's known or plausible that for it to cause cancer. The effects that I've seen, now certain people, of course, you get an immune response when you get the vaccine, so you can feel sick. You can, some people, I've had a few patients who've had, some swollen lymph nodes or a little fatigue that's lasted a week or so. So not everybody is, done after, with symptoms immediately after a day, but, within a week, almost everybody, and most people, it's just that one day, but there are some people that have a few lingering effects for a little bit longer, but that's just because of the inflammation. So it's causing inflammation. That's what it's supposed to do. It's causing an immune response. And, some people ask, well, what if I didn't get an immune response or a reaction? Does it mean I didn't get an immune response? And it does not mean that, no. But a lot of people do get an immune response.
I'd like to ask a question of Dr. Flum. Some of the other concerns that I've heard from people who are pregnant, thinking about getting pregnant, or concerned about fertility, their confusion about the difference between messenger RNA and DNA. Can you speak to that?
Yes, I think there's a question here on these FAQs about fertility. Maybe not there, but I think there are patients who are asked about, do I get the vaccine or not? We're planning on having a child. I said, absolutely. In fact, yesterday an appointment, you and your wife need to get the vaccines immediately. It's much better now because, in fact, in pregnancy, this is a study showing in April, showing that maternal and neonatal morbidity and mortality among pregnant women with and without COVID, and it really showed that 706 pregnant women with COVID diagnosis and 1,424 without were enrolled. They were basically similar, and pregnancy was associated with consistent and substantial increases in severe maternal morbidity and mortality and complications for the baby when pregnant women with and without COVID were compared. I believe we've had a death of a pregnant woman at Lakeside as well. So it's really, it really behooves women thinking of becoming pregnant to get vaccinated. There's no effect on fertility. There's no plausible mechanism for that. In fact, the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, ACOG for short, recommends vaccination during any of the three actual vaccines, but they I lost the spot, but they recommend it prior to pregnancy, during pregnancy, and in the postpartum state, whenever you can get it. If you're not currently vaccinated and you're pregnant, get it, because it is severe. And it, just as we saw with the H1N1 flu several years ago, pregnant women are much more susceptible to these infections than non-pregnant women. So it's really important to get vaccinated to protect yourself and your baby.
And I'd like to invite Dr. Flum. Dr. Flum, do you have anything to add on that topic? We can't hear you.
I think you have to unmute your microphone, or Krisha, can you do it for her or help her?
Oh, we still can't hear you. Okay, what,
let's try.
Oh, there we go. Yay. Okay, great.
You can hear me now. Okay.
Yes, yes.
So hi, I'm Jeannie Flum. I am one of the OBGYNs here at Sutter Lakeside. And yes, I would love to comment. We know that 3 out of 4 women in pregnancy are not vaccinated. It is very difficult currently to convince or try and educate women. They're worried about what's going to happen to my baby. They're worried. These are what I'm hearing from the patients that come in. I want more information about the COVID virus, not the virus, the vaccine, and that it was developed too quick. I want to wait. The problem from my perspective also is we only have about a year's more data with the COVID illness itself. So both things we're dealing with are new to all of us. The vaccination, as Dr. Ashford set forth, is very safe. American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology and Society of Maternal Fetal Medicine both not only recommend the vaccination in every trimester, not repeating it, but having it whenever you can get it, is safe for your baby. And you protecting yourself are not only protecting those around you, but protecting your newborn. There are newer studies that are coming out now that are actually measuring antibodies from the vaccine in the cord, the baby's cord. So there is the potential, like other vaccinations, that we are giving some protection at the time during pregnancy. So you're not changing the DNA of yourself or your baby. Studies now are showing that the vaccination is not associated with increased risk of miscarriage. There are increased risk of increased risk of preterm delivery for a variety of reasons, from even the mild illness that you recover from. So certainly moms typically get much sicker if they have COVID-19 during pregnancy, but you can have not only some lasting effects for yourself, but potentially for the duration of your pregnancy. So it is important. The vaccination, wherever you get it, it's nice that it does not have preservatives. So that's one of the things in pregnancy that we worry about, is get it from, only get it from us because it's a special vaccine. Well, no, get it from anywhere. There isn't preservative. And so the best coverage is the one that you get. And then the other thing people continue to worry about is every time I get the flu vaccine, I get sick. Well, that immune response is not the flu. The same thing with the COVID vaccine. That's your body being trained to make those antibodies to fight off the illness itself. And as your body's working hard to develop those little fighters, yeah, you do get some inflammation. You do kind of feel punky, or a lot of people do. And so that's not the illness. We don't give live vaccines in pregnancy. This is not a live vaccine. And when you feel ill, we're not giving you a little mini COVID illness. No, that's your body working hard to make those antibodies.
Thank you so much, Dr. Flum. And Dr. Aswer, can you comment? One of the things Dr. Flum was saying is that people will say, oh, this was developed too fast. And when I look at the power of the data and the robustness of the data, I'm overwhelmed by it almost. But can you just, what are good speaking points to share with people about that comment?
Well, it was developed in record time, no doubt. We fortunately have the technology. We've had mRNA technology in development for quite a few years, but we don't have a widely used human vaccine using that technology yet. And BioNTech, the German company that Pfizer partnered with to distribute and mass produce that vaccine, had been working on cancer therapeutics, and it's the speed they were using mRNA vaccines to make cancer therapies, so vaccines for cancer. So they were essentially just ready to go. All they had to do was plug in the sequence and then trial it. Now, as far as clinical trials go, the duration, I agree, is shorter than we'd like. We would have loved 3 years of data, but we have people dying of COVID. And what is the best balance between protecting your health, your responsibility for protecting other people's health, including your family and the community, and the amount of data. Now, the amount of data is staggering that we have. As I mentioned here, 5 billion doses of vaccines in the world. All right, that's it's a combination of vaccines. It's not all mRNA vaccines. A lot of that is AstraZeneca, but Pfizer and Moderna make up a good chunk of that. So that's an incredible amount of data, right? How many people are in the US? 360 million. So that's way more people than in the US have received worldwide have received a dose of a vaccine. That's a ton of data. So to say that we don't have enough data is wrong. We would definitely, and what I really think public health messaging needs to focus and be honest and open and show where we have doubt. We don't have 5 years of data on this. However, we're already seeing data on long COVID, which is bad and scary. I have quite a few patients with long COVID in my outpatient practice. We are seeing people die with COVID, and some people, they're never the same. I lost a cousin in Alabama with COVID. She was 52, so that's very sad and unfortunate, and really didn't need to happen. But I think we all, this is at least, and what I'll show you in the next few websites, if you will, are data showing that, well, sure, I think it's misleading to say that the vaccines at this point are preventing infections completely. They are not protecting you against infections to the degree that they were against previous strains. So with Delta, we're seeing increasing numbers of infections in vaccinated people. And so you're going to talk to and see many vaccinated people have or test positive for COVID. The key is those people aren't in the hospital. They're not going to be hospitalized. And I think that is a major achievement. I'll go on unless there's other questions quickly. So this is just, and we'll give you, whoever's interested, you can look at these websites yourself. But this is a letter by Dan Rather, basically saying, you know, healthcare workers, it's very insightful, interesting, you know, and apologizing on behalf of the American people for not getting vaccinated to not protect us on the front lines. So an interesting read. These next few YouTube shots are from the UCSF COVID Grand Rounds. You can watch the whole episode. This was from last week. Very interesting talk about Delta and showing that the vaccine effectiveness does seem to be lower. Now, this is effectiveness against infection, okay? So not necessarily effectiveness against hospitalization or significant illness. So keep that in mind. So yes, those numbers of 90% for Moderna and Pfizer are no longer valid for protecting you against infection. However, they are valid against protecting you from hospital admission. So look at, I like this slide, also from Dr. Crotty. He's at UCSD, a virologist, immunologist. And so the immunity to SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID, you know, we talk about mucosal immunity in the nasal passageways, in the lungs, in the salivary glands, and the goal, okay, ideally, you'd like to prevent infection. So where does the vaccine fall? So pick a line. Before Delta, Pfizer and Moderna, especially, also the Johnson Johnson vaccine too, were preventing a large proportion of infections. So you would even, you'd fall over here in preventing infection. But now, where the average bar of where, after being fully vaccinated, where would you fall? Well, you're falling more polysymptomatic, means a few symptoms, cold-like symptoms. You're probably falling somewhere, the average person is probably polysymptomatic or asymptomatic, somewhere here. That's just a guess. We're definitely, if you're vaccinated, you're definitely not over here. If you're not vaccinated with Delta, because the viral loads are so much higher, and one of the thoughts with COVID is the more virus you're exposed to, the sicker you'll become. So because Delta has much more virus, you'll be exposed to much more virus when you get sick. So you'll be more likely to get sick. That could be one of the reasons that we're seeing a lot of younger people in the hospitals. The age range has certainly shifted lower now. And so I think this is just an important concept. So what you really want to do with a vaccine, obviously you prefer to prevent infection, but what you really need to do is prevent the hospitalization. So to keep our health systems functioning and open and able to handle the people with heart attacks or hernias or, you know, whatever other reason they might need to be in the hospital, we need to keep the line to the left of the hospitalized, somewhere to the left. The further to the left, the better, but you know, we'll take what we can get right now. But right now we are definitely, on average, I think we're somewhere around here with the vaccines. And
can you comment on if someone had COVID? Can you comment on the need for vaccination, even if someone has had COVID, to be able to get that protection?
Yeah, I think I don't have that slide, but your immunity wanes when you've had natural infection, and probably quicker than we would like. So CDC has always recommended testing at 3 months post-infection. because the early data and the current data do show that immunity does wane. But if you get one dose, now we consider vaccination 2 doses, but if you get vaccinated even with 1 dose or ideally 2 doses of the mRNA vaccines, your immunity will be much better than anybody who's just had the vaccine. So, but otherwise you're still putting yourself at risk, especially with Delta, for getting COVID again. So vaccination for somebody who's recovered from COVID is fantastic, provides you with fantastic protection against Delta. The data are very robust for that.
And a question just came in about boosters. You know, when should we get them? You know, what the FDA has recommended, and then does it have to be with the same manufacturer? Like if you got a Pfizer, if you were initially vaccinated with Pfizer, can you get your booster from Moderna and vice versa?
Well, boosters are something, wearing my former WHO hat, that I am somewhat opposed to from a public health standpoint. So I don't think the average person needs a booster. And the reason is this, because if you look at antibodies, and if you watch this talk, it's quite interesting. Dr. Crotty really talks about how the antibody response is decreasing, but the T cell response is somewhat more durable, and that the memory response is durable. So that's what's causing people to get sick, because their antibody levels drop, but their T cell response remains, their memory response, memory B cells and memory T cells is robust and strong, so that they do get sick, but once they get sick and their body sees a significant amount of antigen, they'll jump on it and their body will take care of it. And while they might get some symptoms, they will not end up being hospitalized, because they're not going to get very sick. They'll just get some symptoms. So that's the, so for most people. Now for immunocompromised people and elderly, I don't have a problem with boosters. And again, I'm wearing my public health hat here. If you want to say, I'm almost 8 months out. I actually, first dose in December. So would I, second dose in January. So I'm, next month I'll be 8 months out. So if I'm going to hop on a plane, I would, I'd still feel pretty comfortable without a booster. I will get the booster at some point, but if you're really going to control this pandemic worldwide, you'd love to have vaccine distributed evenly across the world. And giving boosters in developed countries is going to perhaps going to prevent some transmission, but will not control the emergence of new variants.
But that being said, if someone chooses, if the booster is available and someone chooses it, is it important to get the same vaccine that you had before, or does it matter?
We don't have data on that. So we don't know. There's no good data on the mixing. The mixing studies are going to be interesting. They'll come out. What if you give an mRNA booster to the Johnson & Johnson vaccine? What if you give Moderna over Pfizer? Interestingly, the J&J, again, not published, but it looks, the duration of the response actually looks pretty good. A little perhaps longer than the mRNA vaccines. And so that's why, but they are also going to offer a booster. They've been studying, by the way, they've been studying a second dose for a long time. This is pre-Delta, but yesterday they did, release some data or said they were going to release data showing that and requesting perhaps approval for a second dose as well. But again, so boosters will be available eventually, and they are now for certain populations. And for the people with emphysema or elderly. My father-in-law is 76 and lung cancer survivor. He's had part of his lung taken out and he has emphysema. Okay, he should probably get a booster. You know, and similarly, people with compromised immune systems on steroids, organ transplants, HIV, etc. Yes, but you know, if you're healthy, otherwise you need it immediately, and you don't need it immediately, but it will prevent hospital transmission, etc. Again, public health is different than, you know, me, and we all have to do our part to, you know, our role in society. But there's a huge me argument for getting the vaccine now, and even a booster if you're immunocompromised.
I want to ask Dr. Curry, Dr. Flum, Dr. Hollenbeck, have there been any other, are there any other myths that you're hearing about the vaccine or concerns about the vaccine that Dr. Asfour could address? Has he covered most of the ones that you've heard, or are there any out there that you think would be important to talk about?
This is Michelle Curry. So just for people who don't know me on the call, my name is Michelle. I'm a critical care physician. I've treated well over 1,000 patients with COVID at this point. So I guess if you're asking if I've heard other, you know, questions and concerns that people have, I'd say those are, again, the primary ones, and I appreciate addressing all those. I can see if Dr. Flum has anything else to say, but I do have a number of, you know, small things to add as well. But go ahead, Dr. Flum.
Yeah, and from my standpoint, in contrast to Dr. Curry, she's taking care of patients when they're very sick. We're on the side of if they've had the illness, it's been mild, or they haven't had it. So I just want to reiterate that even though out in our community, you're not necessarily seeing such sick people, they're there. Many people know of somebody who has gotten COVID. And so be careful with the stories, because as equally the number of people who've heard about someone in our community getting sick and dying, we're also hearing, oh yeah, I know 4 people who got the vaccine and died from the vaccine. Well, that's not accurate. Way more people are getting sick, needing hospitalization, ICU, and dying than the very, very, very rare person who gets literally sick to the point it was not intended from the vaccine. So most of the illnesses or sickness that people say out in the community, I got sick from the vaccine, is the body working to create the protection, the antibodies. So I just have to reiterate again that when you get sick for a day or so after the vaccine, you are not getting COVID. You are having a response that's intended to help to fight it off. So going into the vaccine with the expectation that, yeah, I may feel punky. I may feel pretty punky. I know several people that didn't feel well, but that's not COVID, the illness. And then seeing people who decided not to get vaccinated and are in the hospital saying, this could have been prevented. I wish I would have got the vaccine. I lost my loved one. And that's, we want to prevent that. We don't want those people to be that sick. We don't want them to meet Dr. Curry. So, and hopefully I can help influence people who are in the office and well to understand that. That's my 2 cents.
I think just a couple other things this is Michelle Curry again, to chime in on. One, to sort of from a while ago, to back up what Dr. Flum said about pregnancy, is that in the actual study for the Pfizer vaccine and trial, there were 23 women who did conceive shortly after getting the vaccine, and all of them had no problems with their pregnancies and were able to deliver fully at term. Secondarily, as Dr. Flum said, there's very, very significant impacts for women and for their babies if they are to get COVID. Even mild disease, like she talked about. So even low level hypoxia from mild disease where you never go to the hospital, you're never admitted, but you still have a degree of hypoxia has significant impact, on your fetus and developing baby. And Dr. Flum can speak to that more, but preterm labor is one of them. The other thing is that we know that, women in pregnancy do get substantially more sick with COVID when they do get the disease. So from a pregnancy standpoint, those women are substantially more at risk. The other thing is just in terms of how they want their delivery to be. For any of us who have been in the room and been at a delivery for a COVID positive mother, asymptomatic, it means your delivery is very, very different. We're all in full pappers. The care is much more complicated. And for a lot of mothers, when you kind of explain that, they simply realize that the impact that having COVID, not just on their health, but on what their delivery will be like, has, for me, when I've talked to people, had a big influence on people. That's sort of my pregnancy part had. And Dr. Professor, thank you so much for speaking about the speed at which this vaccine was developed. Just to second that, this was developed in record time, which was an amazing feat. The things to say about that and the safety of that development are, like he said, these are technologies that we've had in the works and in development for quite some time. It was the first time it was used for a vaccine of this type. The other reason that this vaccine was able to be developed so quickly is we had a unified and massive global effort to develop this vaccine, meaning we had, because China had the most and biggest infections early on, we were able to get data about that virus to help make that vaccine very early and very rapidly from the help of our, colleagues there. We had unprecedented and unparalleled government and private funds put into the development of this vaccine that allowed things to go more rapidly. And so when we talk about the vaccine being developed rapidly, on the back end, we had this technology. These are not new things. We had a lot of resources put into it. So that allowed that upfront part of the vaccine to go quickly. And then as Dr. Esper spoke very nicely to, we now have had huge numbers of people receive this. And we monitor for that safety all the time. As we have seen with, when the Johnson & Johnson vaccine for a short time got pulled because of safety concerns and then put on the market. So we have extensive monitoring of huge numbers of people. Those are a few things. I also, like Dr. Asper, I could go on and on. And mostly I just want to say again that I'm available to talk to anyone here at Sutter Lakeside. If nothing else, I'm always happy to share my personal story of what it's like being a critical care physician in this time. Myself and my colleagues, we sort of did okay in round 1 and round 2. It was really hard and it was horrible. But we jumped in and did what we had to do. I'd say this third round is much harder. We're taking care of young people. We're watching young people die. Just on a personal note, over the weekend, I brought in 2 teenage daughters of a 40-year-old man, and I sat with them as they said goodbye to their father. Everyone in his family has now gone out and been vaccinated and gotten their first shot. And they are so regretful that they hadn't. And when I saw him before I put the breathing tube in, and I talked to him for those last couple of minutes as the last person who saw him conscious, he was so regretful that he hadn't been vaccinated. I turned around and a few minutes later, I had a talk with a 38-year-old mother of 3, completely healthy, thin, no comorbidities. And I had her call her family and her 3 children before I put a breathing tube in her. also tearful and crying that she hadn't been vaccinated. So it's very real, and it has obviously very big impacts. So, and I am happy to talk about any of these things and any concerns and thoughts that people have vaccine at any point. I know it's, for some people, you know, there are a lot of concerns, and I'm happy to talk about those anytime.
Thank you for sharing those stories. Very important.
Thank you, Dr. Curry.
So we have just a few minutes left. There is a question about herd immunity, if you can address that, unless there are some other topics or points that you wanted to make as you conclude, Dr. Asler.
No, herd immunity, just to show, and Dr. Curry, thank you so much for sharing those heartfelt stories. And we all have, you're on the front lines. I'm mainly doing telemedicine, but I have actually taken care of patients in person quite a bit, and it is challenging. So thank you for doing what you do. And sorry that we're not all vaccinated to prevent you having to do that. Just to show you the data on hospitalizations from a big study in LA County, showing that those that are fully vaccinated, very low hospitalization rates. Most of those are just a couple of days. If they've had COPD or something, they could get in the hospital for three days or so. I think we had one patient at Lakeside with a vaccinated. He was in the hospital for 3 days. And then unvaccinated, it's all unvaccinated, almost all unvaccinated. And that's infection rates, sorry. And this is hospitalization rates, which is down here, which is almost zero, right? Just almost zero, as I was mentioning. The herd immunity is.
And sorry, just to jump in on that one thing, but of those patients, so I watch all the patients as well at Sutter Lakeside who get admitted that are COVID positive. The few vaccinated ones that we have that have required ICU admission were people who actually, they were COVID positive, but they had COPD exacerbations. I would say that what we were treating was COPD exacerbations. When you look at their x-rays, when you look at their oxygen demand, when you look at their pulmonary mechanics, we were treating COPD exacerbations. Their COVID was a minimal part of their disease. And then secondarily, actually, I had a slide show here, but one of the things I also have done is I've looked at every COVID positive patient that's admitted throughout the entire Sutter system for this third wave. And in terms of hospital admissions, one thing right now is, we have 97 COVID positive patients admitted in the Sutter system. Of that, 66 are unvaccinated and 19 are vaccinated. There is not a single vaccinated person who's requiring a high amount of either high flow nasal cannula or like a CPAP or BiPAP, and there's not a single one that is mechanically intubated. There is one intubated patient who's COVID positive, but they're intubated for a different reason, not for COVID. Among the unvaccinated population, that's 66 that are unvaccinated, this is just in the Sutter Health System, 23% of those are on mechanical ventilation. And those are people who have, at this point, our outcomes are still around 80% mortality. So it's a huge, of the people who have COVID, the unvaccinated ones are really the people getting sick. The few people that are admitted that are vaccinated are really admitted for other things or are doing very well.
Thank you. I completely agree. And quickly on herd immunity, with Delta, with escapes, perhaps we should just be talking about, rolling immunity, keeping ourselves immune. I don't know if herd immunity is going to be achievable based on, what's your parameter for herd immunity? Is it everybody having some protection, or is it everybody having, complete protection against infection? So the game has changed with herd immunity a little bit, and I don't know that there's a way out at this time with herd immunity. It's all conjecture. So some people say 80%, they throw numbers around, but definitely what you saw with the slide that I showed you for Iceland is that they're about 80% vaccinated and their curve is going down. So that says something. If we get to 85, 90, with measles, we need over 90% for good herd immunity. And, it's a challenge, and we don't know enough yet.
So I just want to thank Dr. Asfor, Dr. Curry, Dr. Flum, Dr. Helmick, everybody who attended this call. Thank you so much for your presentations, for the work that you put into it, for the care of our community. And thank you for your passion around vaccinations and increasing our vaccination rate to not only help ourselves, our families, but also our community and our hospital and our ability to continue to care for patients who not only have COVID, but who don't have COVID. That's one of the things that really concerns me, that our beds are so full that we're not able to we might not be able to do surgeries on people that have cancer. We might not be able to treat somebody with a heart attack rapidly enough because beds are full and staffing are short because some staff have COVID and are out. And so thank you very much for your passion around this. We'll send out information on how to listen to this. If you weren't, I guess if you weren't able to attend, you can't hear that now. And then we'll have another session tonight. So thank you all so much, and stay safe. Wear your masks, wash your hands. Those things still pack a strong punch. And again, thank you for your time. Have a good day.
Bye, everybody.